The saloon doors swung open with a violent crash as Hannah Blackwell stumbled inside, her tear-stained face drawing the immediate attention of every patron in the dusty Diamond Saloon. It was June 1877 in Ely, Nevada, and the mining town had seen its fair share of desperate souls, but something about the young woman's disheveled appearance and quiet dignity despite her obvious distress made her stand out. "Look at her, boys. Seems like someone's having herself a proper ladies' meltdown," jeered Silas Thornton, the wealthy mine owner who controlled nearly everything in Ely with his money and meanness. Hannah wiped hastily at her eyes, her fingers trembling. At 22, she'd known hardship before, but nothing like what the past week had brought. First her father's death, then the revelation of his gambling debts, and now the letter she clutched in her hand noticed that Thornton was seizing their small ranch at the edge of town. "I just need," she began, her voice breaking as fresh tears spilled. "Oh, listen to that, fellas. She just needs something." Thornton's cronies erupted in laughter as he mockingly imitated her voice. "What you need, little miss, is to accept that your daddy's debts are now yours. Though I reckon there are ways a pretty thing like you could work them off." The crude suggestion brought another round of laughter from Thornton's table. Hannah felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground, desperate to negotiate some arrangement that would let her keep her home. A heavy boot heel sounded on the wooden floor, the slow, measured cadence silencing the room. Even before he spoke, Hannah sensed the shift in atmosphere as the stranger who'd been quietly nursing a whiskey in the corner rose to his feet. "That's enough." The voice was deep, carrying the hint of a Texas drawl, but it was the cold authority behind the words that froze the laughter in mid-air. Aaron Vance stepped into the center of the room, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the late afternoon light filtering through the dusty windows. At 28, he wore his years with the weathered confidence of a man who'd seen more of life than most. His dark eyes fixed on Thornton with the steady assessment of someone accustomed to measuring threats. "This ain't your business, stranger," Thornton warned, his hand drifting toward the pistol at his hip. "It is now," Aaron replied, casually adjusting his hat before turning to Hannah. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Madam, I believe these gentlemen owe you an apology. They mocked your tears, but I promise you this from now on, you'll cry only from joy." The statement hung in the air, bold and impossible, yet Hannah found herself believing him despite all logic. Something in his eyes, in the quiet certainty of his voice, reached past her despair. Thornton wasn't as impressed. "Big words from a drifter, you passing through or looking to die in Ely?" "Neither," Aaron answered, his gaze still fixed on Hannah. "I came looking for land, heard there might be some available." Hannah's breath caught. Her ranch, her home, was about to be taken, and here stood a stranger offering what felt like salvation wrapped in danger. "The Blackwell property's spoken for," Thornton growled. "Is it?" Aaron finally looked away from Hannah to fix Thornton with a level stare. "Because I'm thinking the lady here might prefer another buyer, one who'll pay fair market price. The debt's more than the land's worth," Thornton snapped. Aaron smiled, a slight upturn of his lips that never reached his eyes. "Then I suggest we see the loan papers and determine that for ourselves." He turned back to Hannah, extending his hand. "Aaron Vance, madam, if you'd permit me to escort you home, perhaps we could discuss your situation somewhere more private." Hannah hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. "Hannah Blackwell," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "and I'd be much obliged for the escort, Mr. Vance." "The name's Aaron," he corrected gently, "and those tears of yours, they'll stop soon enough." As they walked out into the harsh Nevada sun, Hannah couldn't help but wonder if she'd just made a deal with the devil to escape another. But something about Aaron Vance's calm confidence gave her hope for the first time in days. The walk to the Blackwell ranch was mostly silent. Hannah was too consumed by her churning thoughts to make small talk, and Aaron seemed content with the quiet. His presence beside her was solid and reassuring, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd been drowning in. "It's not much," Hannah said apologetically as they approached the modest ranch house her father had built with his own hands 15 years earlier. "But it's home. It's good land," Aaron observed, his eyes scanning the property with a practiced assessment. Your father chose well. The simple compliment brought fresh tears to Hannah's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. He did everything well except manage money and stay away from cards. Aaron nodded, understanding in his gaze. Most men have their weakness. What's yours, Mr. Vance? Hannah asked before she could stop herself. His lips curved into a genuine smile. Pretty women in trouble, apparently. Inside the ranch house, Hannah busied herself making coffee while Aaron examined the loan documents she'd found among her father's papers. The small kitchen felt even smaller with his tall frame occupying the chair at her father's old table. Thornton's been charging your father double the going interest rate, Aaron finally said, setting the papers aside. And from what I can see, half of these additional fees are fabricated. Hannah placed a steaming cup before him. Does that help us? Us? Aaron raised an eyebrow, the question gentle but pointed. Hannah flushed. I meant I don't expect, I know what you meant, he cut in, his voice softening. And yes, it helps. These terms wouldn't stand up in court. Unfortunately, Ely's judge is in Thornton's pocket like everyone else around here. Then what can I do? Hannah sank into the chair opposite him, fighting back the hopelessness threatening to overwhelm her again. Aaron took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. You could sell to me. But the debt. I'll handle Thornton, Aaron stated simply, as if buying out the most powerful man in Ely was no more complicated than purchasing supplies at the general store. I'll pay off whatever legitimate debt exists, plus a fair price for the land. You'll walk away with enough to start fresh wherever you choose. Hannah stared at him. Why would you do that for a stranger? Something flickered in Aaron's eyes, a memory, perhaps, or an old pain. Because 7 years ago, I was in a situation not unlike yours. Someone helped me when they had no reason to. I'm just passing along the favor. And what do you want with this small ranch? You don't strike me as a man looking to settle down and raise cattle. Aaron's laugh was unexpected, a rich sound that filled the kitchen and made Hannah realize how long it had been since laughter had filled this house. You're more perceptive than most, Miss Blackwell. You're right, I'm not looking to be a rancher. But I do have plans for this land that could benefit the entire region, not just Thornton and his cronies. What plans? Aaron hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I represent investors interested in developing a competing rail line through Nevada. Your property sits on what our surveyors identified as the optimal route. Hannah's eyes widened. A railroad? Here, it's still in the planning stages, Aaron cautioned. But yes, the Central Pacific has had a monopoly for too long, charging whatever they please to transport ore from the mines. Competition would bring those prices down, benefit the smaller mine operations Thornton's been squeezing out. Hannah's mind raced. No wonder Aaron had appeared so suddenly, and no wonder he was willing to take on Thornton. The stakes were much higher than a small ranch. So I'm just a convenient opportunity for your business, she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. Aaron's eyes softened. The land is a business opportunity. Helping you is something else entirely. And what is that something else, Mr. Vance? He didn't answer immediately, studying her with an intensity that made her heartbeat quicken. I haven't quite figured that out yet, he finally admitted, but I'd like the chance to. Before Hannah could respond, a horse's whinny from outside broke the moment. Aaron was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to danger. Thornton, he said grimly, and he's brought company. Hannah joined him at the window, her stomach knotting at the sight of Thornton and 3 of his men dismounting outside. What do we do? Aaron's hand brushed hers briefly, the touch sending an unexpected jolt through her. We negotiate. Stay behind me, but don't show fear. Men like Thornton feed on it. As they stepped onto the porch to meet their unwelcome visitors, Hannah found herself drawing strength from Aaron's steady presence beside her. Thornton, Aaron acknowledged with a slight nod. Something I can help you with. You can get off property that's about to be mine, Thornton snarled, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered pistol. That's not going to happen, Aaron replied, his tone conversational despite the tension crackling in the air. Miss Blackwell and I have been reviewing your loan arrangement with her father. Interesting reading. Whatever debt her father owed is legal and binding, Thornton snapped. Legal, perhaps. Ethical, that's another question. Charging 30% interest when the bank in Carson City charges 12. Adding fees for services never rendered, Aaron shook his head. A judge might have some questions. The only judge that matters in Ely is me, Thornton boasted, his thin lips stretching into a cruel smile. This isn't Carson City and you're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, I am. Aaron reached inside his vest and withdrew a folded document. This is a bank draft for $5,000 drawn on the Bank of San Francisco. More than enough to cover the legitimate portion of Henry Blackwell's debt and purchase this land at fair market value. Thornton's eyes narrowed as he studied the bank draft Aaron held out. Who the hell are you really, Vance? Someone with the means and determination to ensure Miss Blackwell gets a fair deal, Aaron replied evenly. Take the money, Thornton. Walk away from this gracefully. For a moment, Hannah thought Thornton might actually agree. His eyes had taken on a calculating look as he considered the substantial sum. But then his gaze slid to her, and the naked hatred there made her step back involuntarily. You think you can come into my town, interfere in my business, and walk away? Thornton's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Maybe I should just take that bank draft off your corpse. One of Thornton's men shifted nervously. Boss, if that draft is legitimate, shut up, Jenkins, Thornton snapped without taking his eyes off Aaron. We're dealing with this my way. Aaron sighed as if merely inconvenienced. Miss Blackwell, would you mind stepping inside? I'm not leaving you out here alone, Hannah replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. A ghost of a smile touched Aaron's lips. Stubborn woman, he murmured before addressing Thornton again. Let's be clear about what's happening here. You're threatening me over a legitimate business transaction because you're used to bullying people into submission. That ends today. Thornton's face flushed dark with anger. You've got 10 seconds to get off this property before my men open fire. No, Aaron countered calmly. You've got 5 seconds to accept this offer before I telegraph the federal marshal in Carson City about your interesting business practices. I'm sure they'd be particularly interested in how you've been manipulating land acquisitions along potential railroad routes. The accusation hit its mark. Thornton's face paled slightly. How did you? I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with, Aaron cut him off. The bank draft or the marshal, your choice, Thornton. The standoff stretched for several tense heartbeats. Hannah barely breathed, acutely aware that her future, perhaps even her life, hung in the balance of this dangerous game between two strong-willed men. Finally, Thornton snatched the bank draft from Aaron's hand. This isn't over, Vance. It is for today, Aaron replied. I'll have my lawyer draw up the transfer of deed. Miss Blackwell will be staying on as caretaker of the property until our arrangements are finalized. The last part was news to Hannah, but she kept her surprise from showing on her face, understanding instinctively that Aaron was ensuring she wouldn't be left homeless. Thornton spat on the ground before turning back to his horse. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Things have a way of going wrong for people who cross me. They watched in silence as Thornton and his men rode away, dust billowing behind them on the dry Nevada air. Only when they were distant specks on the horizon did Hannah release the breath she'd been holding. Caretaker. She questioned, turning to Aaron with raised eyebrows. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. I apologize for not consulting you first. It seemed the best way to ensure you kept a roof over your head while you decide what you want to do next. And what if I want to stay? The question slipped out before Hannah could consider its implications. Aaron studied her face. Stay as caretaker or stay in Ely? Hannah hesitated, uncertain herself what she was asking. Both, neither, I don't know, she admitted. Everything's happening so fast. Aaron's expression softened. Nothing has to be decided today. The railroad plans won't move forward for at least 6 months. You have time to consider your options. And will you be staying in Ely during those 6 months, Mr. Vance? His slow smile sent warmth spreading through her chest. I believe I will, Miss Blackwell. I find myself unexpectedly interested in seeing how things develop here. They both knew he wasn't talking about the railroad. The next few weeks brought a transformation to Hannah's life she could scarcely have imagined that fateful day in the saloon. True to his word, Aaron arranged for the legal transfer of her father's property, with a generous provision allowing her to remain in the ranch house indefinitely as the property caretaker, with a monthly stipend that exceeded anything she could have earned elsewhere in Ely. While Hannah initially worried about gossip, an unmarried woman living alone on property owned by a bachelor, Aaron took rooms at the hotel in town, visiting the ranch only during daylight hours and always conducting himself with impeccable propriety. During those visits, something unexpected began to grow between them. What started as business discussions gradually evolved into conversations about their pasts, their dreams, the books they'd read, and the places they hoped to see. "My father was a dreamer," Hannah told Aaron one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the distant mountains. "Always chasing the next big strike, convinced we were just one lucky day away from wealth." "And your mother?" Aaron asked gently. Hannah's smile held old sorrow. "She was the practical one, kept us fed and clothed while my father chased his dreams. She died when I was 16, fever." Aaron's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of understanding rather than pity. "My parents were similar. Father always reaching for more, mother holding everything together. Lost them both in a flood when I was 20. The only thing I inherited was debt and determination." "How did you go from that to representing railroad investors?" Hannah asked, genuinely curious about the path that had brought him to her doorstep. Aaron's expression grew distant. "I worked whatever jobs I could find, cowhand, freight driver, eventually security for the Central Pacific. Made some key observations about inefficiencies in their operations, wrote them up, and got them into the hands of people looking to build a competing line." He shrugged. "They were impressed enough to hire me as their representative for land acquisitions." "You make it sound so simple," Hannah observed. His laugh held no bitterness, only appreciation for life's ironies. "Nothing about it was simple, but the hardest journeys often lead to the best destinations." As he said this, his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, Hannah thought he might lean forward, might close the small distance between them on the porch swing. But a crack of thunder broke the spell, and the moment passed. Not all their time was spent in such quiet reflection. Aaron insisted on teaching Hannah to shoot properly, maintaining that every woman living alone should be able to defend herself. These lessons often dissolved into laughter as Hannah proved to be a naturally skilled markswoman, eventually outshooting her teacher. "I grew up watching my father clean his rifle," she explained after hitting her 5th consecutive target. "Just never had occasion to practice myself." Aaron shook his head in mock dismay. "If Thornton knew what a deadeye you are, he'd think twice about causing trouble." The mention of Thornton sobered them both. Though the mine owner had retreated after their confrontation, his influence in Ely remained strong, and his hatred for Aaron and by extension, Hannah hadn't diminished. "Has he given you any trouble in town?" Hannah asked, concern creasing her brow. Aaron's casual shrug didn't fool her. "Nothing I can't handle. That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting," he replied, his tone gentle but firm. "Some burdens don't need sharing, Hannah." It was the first time he'd used her given name without the formal Miss Blackwell, and the intimacy of it distracted her from pursuing the subject further. As summer gave way to fall, Aaron's visits to the ranch became more frequent, his business in town seemingly taking less of his time. He began helping with repairs to the barn roof, mending fences, and even breaking a spirited young horse Hannah's father had purchased shortly before his death. "You don't have to do all this," Hannah protested one evening as they shared a simple supper she'd prepared. "I'm supposed to be the caretaker." Aaron paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Do you want me to stop coming around so much?" "No." The vehemence of her response surprised them both. More calmly, she added, "No, I enjoy your company. I just don't want you to feel obligated." "Hannah," Aaron set down his fork and met her gaze directly, "nothing about the time I spend here is done from obligation." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the hearth fire blazing against the autumn chill. That night, walking Aaron to his horse under a canopy of stars, Hannah gathered her courage. "There's a harvest dance in town next Saturday. I was wondering if perhaps you might want to attend, with me." In the moonlight, she couldn't read his expression, but she heard the smile in his voice. "I'd be honored, though you should know, dancing with me puts you squarely in Thornton's bad graces, more than you already are." Hannah lifted her chin. "I stopped caring about Silas Thornton's opinion the day you walked into that saloon." Aaron reached out, his fingertips just barely brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then it's a date, Miss Blackwell." The harvest dance became a turning point. Hannah spent hours preparing, wearing her mother's best dress, carefully altered to fit her slimmer frame. When Aaron arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze as he took in her appearance gave her more confidence than any words could have. The dance itself was a revelation. Despite whispers and disapproving glances from Thornton's allies, most of Ely's residents welcomed them warmly. Aaron proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding Hannah through waltzes and reels with the same quiet competence he displayed in everything. "Where did a railroad man learn to dance like this?" Hannah asked breathlessly as they twirled around the decorated town hall. Aaron's hand at the small of her back was steady, respectful. "My mother insisted, said any man worth his salt should be able to show a lady a proper evening." "She was a wise woman," Hannah replied, enjoying the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The evening might have been perfect if not for Thornton's inevitable appearance. Halfway through the dance, the mine owner arrived with his latest companion, a flashy woman from Carson City who looked uncomfortable among Ely's more conservative residents. Thornton made a point of approaching Hannah and Aaron during a break between dances. "Well, if it isn't the railroad man and his charity case," he drawled loudly enough for nearby dancers to hear. "Enjoying spending my money, Miss Blackwell." Before Hannah could respond, Aaron stepped slightly forward. "It's not your money anymore, Thornton. The transaction was legal and binding." "Legal, perhaps," Thornton mimicked Aaron's earlier words with a sneer. "But we both know you played me. That railroad's never coming through, is it, Vance? You just wanted her land for yourself." Hannah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She looked at Aaron, searching his face for any sign that Thornton's accusation held truth. "The railroad plans are proceeding on schedule," Aaron replied evenly. "Whether you choose to believe that or not is immaterial to me." Thornton's eyes narrowed as they slid from Aaron to Hannah. "Has he told you about his past, Miss Blackwell, about what happened in Reno, or why he really can't go back to Texas?" Aaron's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "This isn't the time or place, Thornton. It never is with your kind," Thornton retorted. "Men who hide behind fancy words and bank drafts instead of facing what they really are." "And what exactly am I?" Aaron's voice had dropped dangerously low. Thornton leaned in, his alcohol-soured breath filling the space between them. "A killer hiding behind a businessman's suit." Hannah gasped softly, her eyes flying to Aaron's face. His expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes, a shadow, a flicker of old pain, made her heart constrict. "You should leave now," Aaron stated quietly. "Before you say something you'll regret." Thornton smiled nastily. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Vance? Especially when pretty little Hannah hears it." Aaron's hands clenched at his sides, but his voice remained controlled. "The last man who threatened someone under my protection regretted it deeply. I'd hate for history to repeat itself." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between them. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then Thornton's companion tugged at his arm, whispering something urgent, and the tension broke. "This isn't finished," Thornton muttered as he allowed himself to be led away. In the silence that followed his departure, Hannah became acutely aware of the curious stares directed their way, the hushed whispers behind raised hands. "Perhaps we should go," she suggested quietly. Aaron nodded, his face still taut with suppressed anger. They collected their things in silence, making brief farewells to acquaintances before stepping out into the cool October night. The walk to Hannah's waiting buggy stretched uncomfortably between them, questions building with each step. Finally, as Aaron handed her up into the seat, she could contain them no longer. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What he said about Reno, about Texas, Aaron's hands stilled on the buggy's side. In the faint light from the town hall windows, his face looked carved from stone. For a moment, Hannah thought he wouldn't answer at all. Some of it, he finally admitted. Not in the way he implied, but yes, I've killed men, Hannah, 3 to be exact. All in self-defense or defense of others, all ruled justifiable by proper authorities. But killing changes a man, even when it's necessary. Hannah absorbed this, trying to reconcile the gentle man who'd taught her to shoot, who'd fixed her barn roof and made her laugh, with someone capable of taking another's life. Is that why you left Texas? Aaron sighed heavily, resting his forearms on the buggy's edge. I left Texas because after the last incident protecting a widow from men like Thornton, some powerful people decided I was more trouble than I was worth. They made it clear my continued health depended on my absence. And Reno, a muscle twitched in Aaron's jaw. Reno was where I first worked for the railroad. I caught some men sabotaging a bridge. There was a fight. I was the only one who walked away. His eyes finally met hers, vulnerability plain in their depths. I'm not proud of any of it, Hannah, but I won't apologize for doing what was necessary. Hannah studied him in the dim light, seeing not a killer but a man who'd faced impossible choices and lived with their consequences. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and covered his hand with hers. Thank you for telling me the truth. Relief flooded his features, followed quickly by uncertainty. Does it change things between us? Hannah considered the question carefully. Yes, she admitted, watching pain flash across his face before adding, it makes me trust you more, knowing you'll be honest even when it's difficult. Aaron exhaled sharply as if he'd been holding his breath. You're an extraordinary woman, Hannah Blackwell, and you're an honorable man, Aaron Vance, despite what Thornton or anyone else might say. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than their journey into town had been, but the silence now held companionship rather than tension. When they arrived, Aaron helped Hannah down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. I should go, he said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her. Hannah looked up at him, moonlight silvering his features. Or you could stay for coffee. His smile was gentle. People will talk. People already talk, she countered. At least this way we'll have coffee. In the ranch house kitchen, as the coffee pot bubbled on the stove, Hannah found herself watching Aaron the careful way he removed his suit jacket and hung it on the back of a chair, the unconscious grace of his movements as he rolled up his shirt sleeves. After the revelations of the evening, she saw him with new eyes, not as some flawless hero, but as a complex man who'd faced darkness and chosen light despite it. You're staring, Aaron observed mildly as he helped her retrieve cups from the shelf. I'm reassessing, Hannah corrected. His eyebrow arched questioningly. And your conclusions? Instead of answering, Hannah did the bravest thing she'd ever done. She stepped forward, raised herself on tiptoes, and pressed her lips to his. For one terrifying moment, Aaron remained completely still. Then his arms came around her, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, his eyes searched hers. Are you sure about this? About me? Hannah nodded, suddenly certain in a way she'd never been before. More sure than I've ever been about anything. The coffee was forgotten as Aaron gathered her close again, his kiss deeper this time, filled with promises neither of them was ready to voice aloud. Winter came early to Ely that year, bringing heavy snows by mid-November that made travel between town and the ranch increasingly difficult. Aaron took to staying overnight more frequently, always properly in the small bunkhouse adjacent to the main house, but sharing meals and evenings with Hannah. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. What had begun as attraction and gratitude had evolved into something profound, a partnership of equals, built on mutual respect and growing love. It was during one such snowbound evening, as they sat before the fire reading from the same book, that Aaron finally spoke of the future. The railroad investors are sending representatives in the spring, he said, his voice carefully neutral. They'll want to see the property, discuss next steps. Hannah marked their place in the book with her finger. And then what happens? construction would begin by summer. They'll offer you a formal position if you want it, station manager, perhaps. Your knowledge of the area would be valuable. And you? Hannah asked, the question that had been haunting her for months finally finding voice. Where will you be when construction begins? Aaron set the book aside, taking her hands in his. That depends entirely on you, Hannah. On me. I've been offered a permanent position overseeing the Nevada operations, he explained. It would mean staying in Ely or at least nearby. Hope bloomed in Hannah's chest, but she kept her voice steady. Is that what you want? What I want, Aaron said deliberately, is to wake up every morning for the rest of my life beside the woman I love, to build something lasting with her, to see her smile and know I had some part in her happiness. His eyes held hers, vulnerable yet certain. I love you, Hannah Blackwell. I think I have since that first day in the saloon when you stood your ground despite your tears. Joy swept through Hannah with such force she could barely speak. I love you too, she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Aaron reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small ring, its simple diamond catching the firelight. This was my mother's. I've carried it with me since leaving Texas, waiting for the right woman. He held it between them, an offering and a question. Will you marry me, Hannah? Make a life with me here or anywhere else you want to go. Tears filled Hannah's eyes, not tears of sorrow or desperation like the ones she'd shed that day in the saloon, but tears of pure, overwhelming joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. As Aaron slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise, Hannah remembered his words from that first meeting. You'll cry only from joy now. How right he had been. Spring arrived in a burst of wildflowers across the Nevada landscape. The snow melted, revealing the green promise of new beginnings. Hannah and Aaron were married in a simple ceremony in Ely's small church, attended by the friends they'd made and pointedly not attended by Silas Thornton, who'd finally departed for Carson City after the collapse of several of his business ventures, a collapse many attributed to Aaron's quiet influence with state officials who'd launched investigations into Thornton's questionable practices. The railroad representatives arrived as promised, approving the plans and breaking ground for the new line by early summer. Hannah and Aaron moved into a newly built house overlooking both the ranch property and the emerging railroad station, perfectly positioned to oversee their intertwined futures. 2 years later, as Hannah stood on their front porch cradling their infant son Henry in her arms while watching her husband direct the loading of the first official train on the new line, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from desperation to joy. From tears of sorrow to tears of happiness, from strangers to devoted partners building a life and legacy together. What are you thinking about? Aaron asked as he climbed the porch steps, pausing to kiss first his son's downy head, then his wife's lips. Hannah smiled, leaning into his embrace as they watched the train pull away, carrying the future with it. I was thinking about promises kept, she answered, and tears that turned to joy. Aaron tightened his arm around her shoulders. The best kind of tears, he agreed, kissing away the happy moisture that gathered in the corners of her eyes. As the sun set over Ely, painting the sky in brilliant golds and reds, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that her tears past, present, and future would indeed be only those of joy, sheltered as she was in the love of the man who had promised her exactly that on a desperate day long ago.